Ireland's boom made it the envy of the world. Its educated young people and low corporate tax rates made it a magnet for foreign companies. By 2006, it was property that sent the boom into the stratosphere.
It was an age in which entire nations succumbed to irrational exuberance. Hairdressers became celebrity hairdressers, builders drove Bentleys, people went in helicopters to the races.
It even spread to London. Irish property tycoons bought famous landmarks like the Battersea Power Station and the Savoy Hotel.
We were now being told we were one of the richest countries in the world, and we were thumbing our nose a little bit and laughing at the Brits, who were down the pecking order a little bit. We were now richer than they, and we deserved it.
But the good days are definitely gone. I've spent most of my career as a foreign correspondent looking at the traumas of other countries. Now, as voters here prepare to go to the polls, I've come home to find out how economic disaster is changing the lives of Irish people. The story of how Ireland's boom turned from something that was based on solid foundations into madness isn't really that complicated. When the boom started to slow down, the government looked around for a new golden goose, and it turned to the property industry. That would prove a fateful dependency. Property became Ireland's gold rush. As prices soared, the deals and the buildings became bigger and bigger. The sky was the limit for the banks doling out cash to developers. At the height of it all, deals involving tens of millions of euros were served up with coffee and croissants. The venue, this luxury hotel in the heart of Dublin.
One meeting for breakfast could arrange 50 million euros of debt. It wouldn't be... The money wasn't the challenge.
Really? Sit across the table like this?
Yeah.
And 50 million euros?
No trouble, yeah.
In what, half an hour?
Half an hour, yeah. I mean, breakfast, we wouldn't... we'd eat the breakfast and have a chat about sport and life, and then the business could be 10 minutes.
It was a great, gaudy spree, and it looked like it would last forever. Today, that Ireland seems like another planet. Now, ghost estates like this symbolise the crash that came in 2008. There are more than 600 of them littered across the country. Thousands of homes left unfinished when developers ran out of cash. But there are people who live in these places, like teacher Anna Cahalon.
When I bought the house, I thought I was buying a house in a nice, well-finished to a high standard, small housing estate in a town that had good prospects and close to a lot of other towns and a small commute from Dublin as well. Now when you drive into the housing estate and you see there's no street lights, there's no permanent road, it's actually a temporary surface that's down. The footpaths aren't finished. There's open foundations with pipes sticking up through them.
Her house is worth just over half what she paid for it, on an estate that's become an embarrassment.
You know, people drive up and down here on a Sunday. You watch cars come in. At the start, I thought it was to view houses with a chance of buying. Now I think it's just to come in and just see how truly awful estates have been left.
You're like animals in a zoo.
Really, yeah, we are.
Ireland's love affair with property saw estates built all over the country. At the height of the boom, Ireland was building the equivalent of 7 times more houses than the UK. Anna Cahalon's house was meant to be part of an exclusive development in the Irish Midlands.
I suppose I was very excited. What I was given was a lovely glossy brochure, computer-generated images of a small development, landscaped gardens, a green area, a creche. I was really looking forward to moving in and to starting a new life in a new house.
Her savings went on the deposit for her dream home.
It was just mass hysteria at the time to buy a house, to get somewhere, get on the property ladder, in a couple of years sell it and make a fortune and buy a bigger place.
What made the property spree possible was easy credit. Individual home buyers and property developers found the banks more than willing to lend. Bernard Flynn was a retailer who bought scores of properties which he hoped to rent. I think what a lot of people outside don't realise is just how much this madness filtered down through society. Everybody was in on it.
Yeah, you know, take policemen, teachers, nurses, doctors, everybody. The banks themselves became speculators. Money was so accessible, it was like opening a box of confetti, spraying it everywhere, and it was that easy for people to get it. People who were never going to afford to repay what they actually borrowed.
The mortgage market descended into a feeding frenzy. Subsidiaries of British banks like HBOS and RBS had entered the market, sensing lucrative returns.
They were offering lower interest rates on mortgages, and they were also offering more money, things like 100% mortgages, and that really shook up the mortgage market here.
Property fever gripped Ireland. Here in the working-class neighbourhood of North Dublin, where I spent my early childhood, there were some who not only bought their own home, but looked abroad. Phyllis, how are you? Nice to see you. Nice to see you. Phyllis O'Reilly lives in my old house. You bought a property abroad?
I bought an apartment in Turkey. I changed my car every 2-3 years. Just had a good life, good holidays. Money wasn't an issue, and I suppose in a way I probably spent it foolishly as well. You know, like it was kind of, well, I have it, I can afford it. Go out, if I needed something, I just bought it.
Property prices soared. They increased by 270% in the space of a decade, bringing billions in taxes to the government. The revenue from all this building allowed the government to do things their European counterparts could only dream of. They were able to raise public spending and at the same time lower taxes.
The government was addicted like a street crack cocaine addict to all the revenue that came from the property bubble, the VAT on the sale of building products, the income tax from the workers who built all these unnecessary houses.
The government fueled the property boom with generous incentives for the developers.
We were following government policy by building property and building apartments. The government gave us tax breaks to do it, to incentivise people to buy it. Those tax breaks directly made property more expensive, because as a developer, it gave you more demand for the product.
But property booms are notoriously unstable. When some economists warned this one couldn't last, they were mocked by the then Prime Minister, Bertie Ahern.
Cribbing and moaning is a lost opportunity. In fact, I don't know how people who engage in that don't commit suicide. Because, quite frankly, the only thing that motivates me is being able to actually change something.
Ahern apologised to the families of suicide victims, but the following year those words would come back to haunt him. An Irish economy already starting to decline was hit badly by the global economic crisis. Property prices everywhere began to fall. For Ireland, it spelt disaster.
Ireland blew it by ceasing to believe that you sustained prosperity by making things and selling them, and starting to believe that there was a new magic kind of prosperity, which was made out of basically selling bits of Ireland to each other.
Unemployment doubled in 1 year. The construction industry was first to be hit. Patrick O'Leary was a cabinet maker who had constant work in the boom years.
With my own money, I didn't have to depend on anyone or anything. My money I was spending at the end of the day. No things have changed.
He's one of nearly 150,000 people who've lost jobs in the construction industry. Over the last 2 years, work has simply dried up.
I'm 29 years of age. I'm living at home with my mother. My girlfriend lives in her house with her mother. Like, I'd love nothing better, like, to be able to move out of home and, you know, depend on myself. But the way things are, I can't afford to, and so it's fairly frustrating.
To get out of the house to fill the empty hours, he trains at the club in Cork City, where Roy Keane played football as a boy.
Depressing. That's the only way I can explain it, I suppose. So I go out, run around for 2 hours, come home, watch telly.
The impact of the crash spread through the economy. In Dublin, Phyllis O'Reilly lost her job as a factory supervisor.
It was like a bereavement, just devastation. Couldn't believe it. After 16.5 years, just couldn't believe it. Loved the job, absolutely loved it.
And you were looking around at a jobs market in Ireland which had vanished?
Vanished, nothing. There was just nothing out there.
Nearly 1 in 10 Irish mortgage holders is in trouble, and Phyllis O'Reilly is one of them.
What's your financial situation now? How do you pay the mortgage?
I don't. At the moment, I'm 3 months in arrears with my mortgage. My mortgage and my bills, it's nearly £2 grand a month. I can't meet the bills, can't meet any of my bills.
So what are you going to do?
I don't know. I really don't.
The banks are pursuing people like property developer Bernard Flynn, but he blames them for doling out so many loans.
It was so easy to get access to money. It really was. On a phone call you could get, by and large, if you were dealing with banks, you could get really what you wanted over a phone.
Did that make you lose the run of yourself?
Not really. I didn't think I'd lost the run of myself. I really didn't. Most of my decisions
were... You must think it now.
Oh, I know it now, that the way the system was, the pyramid that was there was no foundation to support the madness of the pyramid that took place.
From a debt of millions to billions, the man who got some of his loans over breakfast at this hotel is now a major debtor.
We have €2 billion of loans, which is a huge amount of debt. I'm a very small portion. My personal debt's 143 million, as per my statement of net worth, which I've just signed off. So
your personal debt
is 143 million,
and that's a small amount?
Versus the 2 billion. The numbers are huge, and they're business numbers, and I disconnected in my own way that kind of money from personal money.
The dominoes started to tumble. As developers got into trouble, they couldn't pay back their loans. The major Irish banks were now dangerously exposed, and one in particular, Anglo-Irish Bank. This was the bank that lent property developer Simon Kelly and others like him millions over breakfast.
The fear came onto the bankers' faces, and, you know, they could see the thing. It's like a slow-motion car crash, and they could see it unravelling because every loan became a problem.
Anglo had made the fatal mistake of believing property prices would keep rising. When they collapsed, the bank was left with more than 30 billion euros in losses.
What you saw here at the bank was recklessness, overconfidence, lack of investment in infrastructure, no checks and balances. It was all a very nasty cocktail.
The Dutch banker who was called in to try and rescue Anglo after the crash was stunned by what he found when he went through the books.
Anglo is the baddest bank on the planet, is what they say. Anglo is the main culprit in this drama.
By the end of 2008, Anglo and the other banks were facing collapse. The Irish government made a fateful decision. It would bail out the banks to the tune of billions.
You didn't have any idea of the scale of the Irish bank's crisis when you offered the guarantee?
No, it's fair to say I knew they were rocky, but I didn't think that they were shaking as badly as they were.
Why on earth would you give them such an open-ended guarantee if you didn't have the facts?
But
isn't that reckless?
No, because the other option then was to have an immediate default and the knock-on consequences that would have had for the Irish economy.
But the cost of the guarantee threatened to bankrupt the Irish economy. The government was forced to seek international rescue. The IMF and the EU stepped up with loans worth 85 billion euros, loans the Irish taxpayer would have to repay.
What the Irish taxpayer is being asked to do is very simple. It's being asked to pay off the gambling debts of reckless, irresponsible bankers and investors.
It wasn't just the Irish taxpayer. Britain contributed a further £3.2 billion to the bailout. That's because economic crisis in one country can hurt the other.
Well, our two economies are interdependent.
So crisis in Ireland matters for people in England. And
yes.
Of course, British banks are heavily exposed here.
Yes, indeed. And British economic interests are exposed here as well.
As the fallout from the crisis deepened, the former boss of Anglo-Irish, the so-called baddest bank on the planet, was questioned about alleged financial irregularities at the bank. Sean Fitzpatrick was released without charge, a files with the Irish Director of Public Prosecutions. Mr. Fitzpatrick denies any wrongdoing. He declined to speak to us. There's real public anger at the idea of Ireland being forced to seek an international bailout. So you Here in North Dublin, I've come to meet an old family friend, Breda Thunder, who's watched her country's crisis with disbelief.
Upset for themselves as well.
When you look at the state of the country,
yes,
what do you feel?
Shame. Shame. We all worked for what we had, and we worked for everything. We made the country, my generation and the generations before, and then this crowd went with a begging bowl to Europe. And I'm so ashamed that the state we're in, and it's all through greed.
Did you ever imagine you would see the country in this state? Because you grew up in poverty.
Oh, yes.
In really serious poverty, in the tenements of Dublin.
Yes, but we never felt poor or poverty-stricken. We had pride. We had pride in ourselves and our families. And we went to work and we done an honest day's work for an honest day's pay.
The current finance minister inherited the crash when he came into office in 2008. He was the one forced to ask for the international funds.
Yes, my party got it wrong. I accept that. I've always accepted that as a member of this government. We let the economy overheat. Everyone expected a soft landing. There was no soft landing. And there was a failure of government. There was a failure in the regulatory system. And there was also a failure in public opinion and Parliament generally.
But the government now faces its moment of judgment. The most important election in modern Irish history takes place in 4 days. Joan Collins is on the campaign trail, fighting for a seat in one of Dublin's poorest constituencies. Here, the bailout is going to mean budget cutbacks almost twice as severe as those in the UK. The minimum wage is being cut by 12%. What's the main mood that you get when you're talking to people?
The main mood is one of change. People want to see a change of politics, and anger, frustration, despair.
Joan took her battle against the political elite to the gates of Parliament and into the face of the man she blames for Ireland's crash, the former Prime Minister, Bertie Ahern.
Yeah, kind of. It's not point.
No wages and taxes and all that. Have you no shame? You don't shame yourself. The TV there the last 2 days mouting out of yourselves. You should be ashamed of yourselves.
Thank you.
Shame on you.
Thank you.
That's an anger that
most Fianna Fáil TDs are going to face at the doorsteps.
Well, it is, but I have to say outside here this happens every day because people come along here to try and get themselves on TV and radio.
Not the mea culpa Joan was hoping for.
His legacy to the Irish people is a begging bowl, and he should be ashamed of himself for doing that. And he's not the only one. All the rest of them are on the same category as far as I'm concerned. They've all been in their snouts in the trough.
Public anger isn't just about bad economic decisions. There's a widespread feeling that a cosy elite ran the country.
In the boom years, some bankers, developers and politicians enjoyed close friendships. And policy on tax, on land rezoning, was geared towards the construction industry. And that industry was generous to the main governing party, Fianna Fáil. A third of its disclosed donations came from property and construction interests.
It has been a real problem in Irish politics, and you know, you don't have to be a genius or a professional historian looking at Ireland to figure that out. That cronyism, a culture where people did deals, scratched each other's backs, put their friends onto the boards of public bodies, it was rampant here.
But Irish life, Ireland is a small country. Everybody knows everybody. If you want to call that cronyism, you can. But everybody tends to know everybody in Ireland because it's a small country. And it's very easy to leap to judgment.
The reason cronyism is so dangerous in Ireland is that it's the dark side of what's actually quite an attractive thing about Irish society. You know, you can meet the Prime Minister, you can bump into politicians, you can meet bankers on the street. People are around the place. It seems like a very cosy, intimate place. But of course, coziness in business is disastrous.
In the boom years, there were jobs aplenty, and Ireland attracted workers from all over the world. What a difference a bust makes. Now, people are leaving. 50,000 are expected to go this year, 1,000 a week. In Cork, where I lived as a teenager, unemployment among the under-25s soared by 92% in 1 year after the crash. This is my old school, and I've come to talk to some of the students in the final year.
It's disgraceful and saddening to think that we all have a debt. We owe this debt like the country as a whole does, and we did absolutely nothing to deserve it.
Many of the boys are planning a future outside of Ireland.
If people now, after a generation of politicians and bankers causing such a mess, if they're placing their hope in our generation of coming out with fresh ideas and fresh thinking, they'll be very disappointed because children are the future. These children right here are going to be leaving the country.
It's a choice that's already been made by one young university graduate. Her family home is in the Cork suburb where I once lived. Maeve Ní Ceallanáin is packing to go.
I'm educated, I've done what I was supposed to, you know, this is my country. I want to be able to stay here, I want my children to be raised here. I want that option, but at the moment I suppose I don't feel I have that option, but I suppose I'm being turned away, you know.
Maeve has a first-class master's degree in town planning. Since she graduated, she hasn't been able to find a job she's qualified for.
Things are bleak, you know, in Ireland, and it's sad to see our children at the suffering end because some people were short-sighted and greedy.
Maeve is leaving Ireland for New Zealand in the hope of finally starting her career.
We'll certainly miss that sort of bubble and oomph that she brings, you know, to our family.
As for the developers, many of the biggest have had their loans taken over by the state. They're eventually supposed to pay them back. If they don't, the taxpayer must. Simon Kelly says his group's businesses owe $2 billion. He still earns €60,000 a year.
I'm ashamed that we let the bubble go so big, and I say we on purpose because it was a societal thing.
Now, what about I?
personal responsibility?
Oh yeah, I feel stupid for being involved from day one. And people say, "What regrets do you have?" I said, "The regret is probably not going off and doing something else from day one." You know, I don't think if I'd left in 05...
That's a regret about yourself.
Yeah.
What about the people who are suffering as a result of
well, yeah,
this?
well, I think I'm suffering as much as anyone, and probably more.
Ireland's obsession with property seems over for now. And there are signs the country is turning to more reliable wealth creation. Exports are up. And companies are still drawn here by low tax rates. Among these voters, there's a mixed view on what the future holds.
We'll get over it. We always do. It's cyclical. But it's really tough at the moment, especially for the young people.
I don't think this election coming up is going to make any difference. No difference whatsoever.
I mean, our exports are very strong. And people, I think, you know, if people get a little bit of confidence back, I think we will turn a corner and we will move on, you know.
When Ireland's elite blew a fortune, they changed the lives of generations of people. There's little chance of any escape from the ghost estate for Anna.
I know I'm, let me see, 3 years into a 40-year mortgage, so I still have another 37 years with this noose around my neck.
These are days of sad departures. The O'Kellennon family from Cork took their daughter to the airport last month. As Maeve and her boyfriend left for New Zealand, her father's thoughts were of a public holding to account of those responsible for the crash.
It would show a certain facing up to their irresponsibility and their greed, and also to give a little comfort to perhaps a whole generation whose future in this country, you know, has been taken away from them.
Maeve O'Kellennon won't be in Ireland to vote in 4 days' time, but she will be watching from afar to see if its new rulers can make Ireland a place to which she's able to return. Next week, army manoeuvres aimed at restoring discipline to Britain's troubled classrooms. The government wants to send in the troops by encouraging the ex-military